All right, so let's look at Mark chapter 5. So if you're willing and able, why don't you stand as we continue this series, Encountering Jesus. All right, this is God's Word. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he would wrench the chains apart, and he broke the shackles to pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the country. And now there was a great herd of pigs feeding on the hillside. And they begged him, saying, "Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep banks into the sea and drowned into the sea. The herdsmen fled. They told it to the city and to the country, and the people came to see what had happened. And they came to see Jesus, and they saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had been Legion, sitting there, clothed in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from the region. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but he said, "Go home to your friends. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy upon you." And he went away, and he began to proclaim it in the Decapolis, how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. This is God's word, and every bit of it is true. And he gives it to us because he loves us. You may be seated. Every time I read Mark chapter 5 or the other accounts in the other Gospels of this event, I always marvel. I cannot believe how wild this story is. You know, we're looking at this series, Encountering Jesus. And this morning we're talking about the defeat of evil. So let me ask you, do you know evil when you see it? Do you know evil when you see it? Perhaps you've seen these monkeys speak no evil, see no evil, and hear no evil, right? Or what I call the updated version. We made Ray be the one with his hands over his mouth. You know, when you think about your day-to-day life, you know, we don't really think much about seeing evil. I mean, we really are sort of a hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Because in some sense, it's kind of distance from us. In some ways, we could be insulated to it. But then suddenly, it will hit us right out of the blue. When there's a terrorist attack, when we hear about the abuse and the killing of a small child. When we think about things in history like Hitler or Stalin, the Holocaust, the Klan, or a serial killer. And when we see those things, and when we hear those things or remember those things, we feel it down deep within us and we say, there it is. That's evil. You know, in this series, we're talking about encountering Jesus. You and I encountering Jesus. Us seeing Him and experiencing Him. Us knowing Him, enjoying Him, and worshiping Him. Well, how does that happen? How does that happen? Well, in this passage, in order for us to encounter Jesus, we have to see evil. We have to see evil, and we have to name it. So let's do that together. Take your sermon outline, and let's look at the reality and the ruin of evil. First, the reality. This is the most intense demon possession in the New Testament. Legion means thousands. It was a Roman military term categorizing between 2,000 and 6,000. Now, when you see this kind of intense evil, demon possession, many modern people will say about this kind of intense evil, they'll say, well, it really does not exist. Modern people will say, okay, the people of that time, way back then, those Bible time people, they were kind of primitive. They were uneducated. They were naive. And they were simplistic. And they just pretty much attributed a lot of human malady to demonic activity, like mental illness or insanity or seizures. They just kind of grouped it all under the influence of the devil. They were not as advanced as we are. We're more scientific. We're more logical. We're more educated. But the truth is, the Bible is much more nuanced and complex in its understanding of evil than many people who scoff at the idea of demons or real evil. The Bible does not lump all the distortions of human behavior and attribute it all to the devil. In fact, the Bible actually makes clear distinctions and shows the complexity of brokenness. Look at Matthew 24. News about him spread over Syria, and the people brought him all who were ill with various diseases, those who suffered severe pain, demon-possessed, and those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. The Bible often makes a clear distinction between demonic activity and seizures. The Bible's clear that we are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. There was a young man who graduated from Harvard. He did his further pre-med work at Columbia University. And then he finished his MD at Case Western, and then he went on to get another degree in psychiatry. He became the assistant director to the Surgeon General of the United States in psychiatry. And he was given to study 2 cases of so-called demon possession. And this is what he wrote. With these cases, I will resolve and make every effort to prove as scientifically as possible that there are no grounds for such belief in demon possession. And when he was done, he was converted to Christianity. He encountered demons. He encountered evil. You might have heard of him. His name is M. Scott Peck. He wrote several bestsellers, including The Road Less Traveled and The People of the Lie. You know, we can get kind of lulled to sleep a little bit when it comes to evil forces in our world. And then we're just shocked awake with 9/11 or a genocide or another tragedy of evil proportions in the world. But Mark 5 Mark 5 is given to us to kind of wake us up to this reality. So let me just ask the question. Is there anyone in this room who is demon-possessed? Don't say your spouse. You know, demon possession might be rare in our day, but demonic influence cannot be debated. In fact, the Bible talks about demon influence all the time, how the devil influences us. Paul tells us in 1 Timothy that pride and arrogance is falling into the trap of the devil. In Ephesians, Paul says that bitterness is from the influence of the devil. And Jesus himself warned Peter. He said, Peter, Satan wants to sift you like wheat. So the Bible teaches that demonic forces stir up and agitate and magnify all other forces that mess with your life. And so while we may not have numerous cases of demonic possession, demonic influence is very real in our world and in our gut. Sometimes we wake up to it and we see it. That's the reality. Now the ruin of evil. Look at this description of this man again. In Mark 5 again. Look at the passage here. The man lived in the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he often been chained hand and foot. And he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart. He broke the irons. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day he cried out in the tombs, cutting himself with stones. Notice in that description how much of it has to do with strength and power. Do you know what a Faustian pact is? It comes from a German legend about a man who was very successful in life, but he was also very dissatisfied. And so, in the legend, he makes a deal with the devil for his soul in exchange for unlimited power and knowledge and pleasure. A Faustian pact is to make a deal with the devil. Here's an artistic rendering of another story. That's not a pope, that's a saint. He's obviously making a deal with the devil, that the devil would build his church in exchange for the first soul that walked through the church. But what Wolfgang does not know is that he will be the first to enter. You see, a Faustian pact is you get power, you get beauty, you get pleasure, you get fame, but you lose yourself. Now, I mean, it's great stuff for movies and stories and legends. But how does it apply to us? Well, let's bring it down to us. You see, if you make anything more important to your meaning in life, to your sense of self-worth, more important to your happiness than Jesus, then you are making a pact with it. You might say, well, no, I'm a Christian. I don't make a deal with the devil. But what is your heart centering on? Where are there over desires? What do you have to feel great about yourself? Whatever it is, you could be making a pact with it. Becky Pippert says this: the person who seeks power is controlled by power. The person who seeks acceptance is controlled by the people he or she wants to please. But there is one thing that is certain: no one controls themselves. We are all controlled by whatever is the Lord of our lives. We are controlled by the things that we will make a pact with to get life. Helen Rubin writes this. She says, of all the subjects that we obsess about, success is the one we lie about the most. That success and its cousin power will make us important. That success and its cousin fame will make us happy. It's time to tell the truth. Why are so many of our generation's smartest, most talented, most successful people flirting with disaster in record numbers? People using all their means to get money and power and glory, and then self self-destructing. You see, if you make a pact with your career or the success of your children, then it will become your functional savior, and you'll work harder than anyone else, and you'll make sure that there's no failure in your path, and you will cut yourself climbing on the stones of success, and you'll become more and more a slave. We just saw it, didn't we? The Houston Astros, Major League Baseball. They made a pact with success at any cost, to steal signs and to win championships. It made them a slave, and now they've lost the soul of their organization. We saw it years ago in baseball too, with performance-enhancing drugs, with Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and others, who would inject steroids into their body to gain what? Strength and power. And no one was going to bind them to poor hitting ever again. And they became slaves. And they lost their lives. They lost their souls. Beauty. I can't have any imperfections. I can't be fat. Eating disorders. Botox. Excessive makeup. Clothes. Shoes in excess. Slavery. A life. Get power. Get beauty. Get success. People using all their means to get it and then self-destructing. Now, most of us think, okay, all right, but I'm not like the guy in Mark chapter 5. Well, yeah, you're not to that extreme. But what I'm talking about is the influence of the evil that comes when we want something good to deliver us other than Jesus, and we give too much of ourselves to it, and we become a slave. We make a pact with it. Now notice in this passage, it says in Mark, that no one could bind him anymore. You understand what that means? It means that evil was gradual in his life. Evil is gradual. It comes to us in low dosages until finally part of our lives or all of our lives is in the tombs of anger, in the tombs of bitterness, in the tombs of unforgiveness, in the tombs of being possessed with materialism. And what happens is you kind of sort of wake up and you go, how did I get here? How did our marriage get here? How did our finances get here? How did I become this bitter, critical, cynical, grouchy person? When did this happen to me? When did this happen to our friends? Evil is gradual. Second, the redemptive victory over evil. This man is naked. He is scarred. He is cutting himself with stones. He lives in the tombs. I mean, evil is literally shrieking out of him. It says no one was strong enough to subdue him. Why? Because he was a legion of demons, thousands upon thousands. If you think about it, it's kind of like Hollywood. Because you've got thousands of evil coming, and you got one guy, one versus thousands. Jesus there with long hair, sandals, just standing there. It's just like a movie. You know, and in all the movies where these action movies, you know, the good guy is always taking on what? Just an untold number of enemies. And he's doing battle against the evil people in these movies. And it always goes the same way. I mean, he goes at him and he's just outnumbered. And there's explosions, you know. So cool. You know, and there's knives and there's bullets and all this kind of stuff, and he's flying through the air and he's beating up the bad guys, and then they do something in slow motion, like a bullet just barely missing the good guy, right? And what happens in all those movies? It's always the same. The good guy, the hero, he never gets hurt. In fact, he usually defeats the enemy and he doesn't even break a sweat. And it's just so ridiculously unrealistic. But you go back for the sequel. Why do we keep going to those movies? Why do they keep making them? The reason is because we long for someone to stand before untold thousands of evil and just say, "What is your name?" Come out of him and not even break a sweat. You know, Jesus does not call on a higher power. He's not like Thor who grabs his hammer, or Iron Man who summons his suit, or the Hulk who turns green. No, Jesus just says, "What is your name?" Come out of him. I mean, does this not blow you away? Do you understand that nothing in all of world history is ever as powerful as what Jesus does here? What is your name? The Apostle Paul tells us what Jesus does to evil. In Colossians, he says that Jesus disarmed the evil powers, the authorities, and the demons by making a public spectacle of them, by triumphing over them, by being nailed to the cross. So this demoniac is naked because he was victimized by evil. And Jesus becomes naked, being ripped of his clothes while he is nailed to the cross. This demoniac is shrieking out cries. And Jesus cries out, "Father, forgive them." This demoniac is cutting himself with stones. And Jesus goes under the Roman lash to the little stones and the tips of the whip that turned his flesh into ribbons. And this demoniac is forsaken by his community. He lives out in the tombs. And Jesus was forsaken by his community, the Trinity. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus takes on the powers of evil, and he actually lets the enemy seemingly have their way with him, doesn't he? He becomes a prisoner, so to speak, so that he can set us free. And Jesus is able to say to this man, "Come out," because of what will come in the latter part of Mark's gospel. The redemptive victory. But you know, to talk about this passage, you got to talk about the pigs, right? I mean, it's just really wild. It's so strange. I mean, what is the deal with the pigs? Well, I'd like to ask another question first. Why do we see so much demonic possession in the New Testament, way more than what we see in the Old Testament, and way more that we've experienced in history since? Why do the demons inhabit and take possession of people? The reason is that because the most decisive battle in history is not yet still future. It is right in the New Testament. Because Jesus, God put all of his glory and honor and power into the incarnation of Jesus. Jesus is God in the flesh. And Satan, he's no good at anything. All he can do is imitate. So he puts demons into people. So demons in the flesh take on God in the flesh, and that is the ultimate battle. And Jesus is saying here, in a sense, at the very least, no more human abuse. for this legion of demons. You're done. And so he sends them off into the pigs. But why into the pigs and why into the lake, the sea? Because in Revelation, the last battle, Christ, it says, by the words of his mouth, he will just speak. And all of his enemies, all of our enemies, will be cast into the lake of fire. So this is a future, a picture of the future being brought into the present in Mark's gospel. Third is the response. If the pigs were not crazy enough, the response to the victory over evil. The battle between Jesus and the legions, it really draws a crowd because the owners of the pigs run in and tell everybody what has happened. And so people are coming out to the tombs area in droves. And the townspeople come, and what they do next is really perhaps the most shocking thing in this passage. What do? They ask Jesus to leave. They ask him to leave. Jesus has just healed this man of legions of evil. So there will be no more evil outside the town. There'll be no more shrieking at night. There'll be no more children having nightmares because of the man out in the tombs. Not only that, it says that the people were afraid. So Jesus gets rid of evil, and the people are afraid. That's pretty crazy. I mean, you would think that they would be like jumping for joy, right? You know, ding dong, the witch is dead. You know, Stalin's gone, Hitler's gone. I mean, evil's gone. It's vanquished from among us. But they're not happy, they're afraid. There's two things going on here. First, the pigs, 2,000 pigs. That's a lot of bacon, right? That's a lot of chops. That's a lot of money. So the owners are what? They're mad. They've lost a huge profit. You see, the value of the pigs was more important to them than the man's rescue. The value of their pigs was more important than their own rescue from evil. You and I, we will ask Jesus to leave when our possessions possess us. When Jesus challenges our loyalties to our possessions, we will resist him. We'll say, Jesus, you need to leave that part of my life alone. Won't we? The second thing is, it says that when the man was healed, and he's dressed, he's sitting in his right mind, he's with Jesus, it says that they were very much afraid. Now, once I tell you a little bit as to why they were afraid, you might begin to shift in your seat as well. So first, this question. Who is the enemy in Mark's gospel? Who is the enemy at this time? Who was the embodiment of evil for Mark's audience? It's the Romans. It's the legions of Roman troops that occupy their land. The Romans are the bad people. So for Mark's audience, when they think about evil and disruption and trouble, it's the Romans. It's those people over there. They're the bad ones. If we could just get rid of the Romans. Do you know what all of us do? We constantly justify ourselves by looking at people or categories of people and saying this: evil is over there. It's those people. It's the people at work. It's the people, my neighbors. It's people over there. It's the Democrats. It's the Republicans. It's the Muslims. Those people, those are the evil ones. And we tell ourselves, oh, so quietly and oh, so often, the evil's not here. It's out there. We even post it on Facebook, don't we? Jesus has just removed from these townspeople their source of self-justification. You see, they can no longer say that pure, bad evil is out there living among the tombs. Jesus has removed it. And what can be more scary and terrifying than to have your power, your leverage, to think of yourself as a good and upright person removed because now you're naked and exposed? That evil is not outside of you, that evil is inside of you. That the legions of the Roman soldiers is not where evil resides, it's the legions in your own heart. And in Mark chapter 7, Jesus names the legions within us. Here it is. He says this, "For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, folly." All these things, what does he say? Jesus says, they come from within. Do you understand that in many, many ways that the evil in this world that's outside of you, in some ways it's not that scary compared to realizing the evil within? You know, it was years ago, my wife and I went to a conference, a Christian conference, with some other staff members. And at this conference, there was teaching and there was great worship, and we met in small groups. But there's one thing different about this conference. You also met with your spouse for marriage counseling. So we had 5 sessions with a counselor. And I thought, this is going to be great. Because, our marriage is good. I mean, after all, she's living the dream. Right? Well, the counselor did not think so. And the counselor started the first session out focusing on my sin. And then that carried over to the next session and to the next session. And we got to the 4th session, and I literally was walking in saying to myself, enough time on me. When are we going to get to her? So I thought, we need a break from this. And I told Ann, I said, let's just blow this conference and let's just go on a date. Okay? I said, how about we go take in a movie? So we didn't show up, and we went to a movie. And the movie we went to was, I believe it was the second movie, Lord of the Rings. And I didn't know much about the movies, didn't know what they were about or anything, I just heard they were good, and they were action movies, so I was in. Well, so we go to this movie, and it is one of the darkest, most evil, foreboding movie I've ever seen at the time. I mean, monsters coming out of the screen, all these different faces of evil constantly coming out. So here's a picture from just one part of it. I mean, just constantly, all these monsters and evil all through the film. And the film ends with this climax of all these thousands and thousands of monsters descending on this little white castle. And we walk out of the movie, and my wife says, "Whew, man, that was dark and foreboding and evil." But you know what? All I could think about was that the evil depicted in the film was in me. And that it was exactly what the counselor was trying to get me to see. That evil was not outside of me somewhere, but that it was in me. And this is what was causing the problems in my life and in my marriage. Alexander Solzhenitsyn says this: If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were only necessary to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? And so the townspeople were afraid, and they asked Jesus to leave. So what will you do, Christian? Will you stay religiously comfortable, always controlling the narrative? Or will you let him subdue the legions within? You see, encountering Jesus happens when he says to you, "What is your name?" What is your name? And you reply, "I am Legion. I am sinner." Now, the demon-possessed man responds completely differently than the rest of everybody else. His response is he begs, he pleads to be with Jesus. And Jesus makes him a missionary. Jesus makes him a herald of the good news. But what is his message? What is his calling? Jesus says, "Tell them how much the Lord has done for you." How the Lord has had mercy on you. So his message, his calling is to repeat, to rehearse, to retell that he is the one who has received mercy. And as Jesus is commissioning him to go, he is also renaming him. He is saying to this man, "No longer are you Legion. You are now the one who has received mercy." So, that is the power over evil. That is the defeat of evil. The mercy we have received. So, no matter how much evil tries to strip us, Jesus became naked for us. No matter how much evil tries to isolate us from community, Jesus lost his Father's face. No matter how much evil tries to dehumanize us and wound us, Jesus was wounded for us. No matter how much evil tries to drive us out to the places of death, Jesus went to the tomb for us. He defeated evil. He defeated death, whereby he now says to us, not only go home and tell, but come home. Come home with me. Let's pray.